Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the 3-Star Lounge. Recently, I've been thinking about the Saints Row franchise, because with the reboot being, well, a game, there are a lot of people who are worried about the future of the franchise, and rightfully so. But this gives me an opportunity to share a thought that I've always had. The Saints Row franchise will lend itself to some pretty fun movies, with the grind of bringing up the organization, doing it again, avenging a friend, eventually become a president and punch aliens in the nose. There's a lot of crazy stories that can be told within the Saints Row universe, especially if told in the style of satire seen in the classic film Black Dynamite. What I'm thinking is two movies, one with the epilogue of the first and another with the plot of the second. Now before we get started, I do understand that the gameplay is from Saints Row 3. I have no real way to capture my copies of the other Saints Rows, and Sony goes to great lengths to keep you from capturing the streams. So, for now, this is what it'll have to be. Welcome to the lounge. One reason I would pair the movies in this way is that not only do the first two games take place in the same location, the fictional city of Stillwater, Michigan with one L, also the end of the first game going into the second is where the Saints Row franchise begins to set itself apart from the Grand Theft Auto franchise in a more substantial way. With that being said, setting the first movie in the epilogue of the first game allows us to spend time with Stillwater in a state you don't traditionally see it in, at peace as far as organized crime is concerned, with the 3rd Street Saints on top, giving us a glimpse of the power the organization has within the city, a stark contrast to the second film that was centered around regaining that power and once again placing the Saints on top of the food chain, as does the second game. Staying focused on the now though, the first film, Stillwater, will have just witnessed the dismantling of all of the crime organizations at the hands of the 3rd Street Saints, masters of Stillwater. People around the city should have their own reaction to this, from people lamenting all the violence that took place in the streets, to others simply being glad that it appears to be over for now. There are many characters that exist within the world of Saints Row, however most of them I don't view as necessary to tell the story that we're exploring in the film. As mentioned earlier, we're only covering the events of the epilogue, and as such, most of the big names of the game are already out of the picture. However, their defeat was integral to the state of power we would see within the first film. With that in mind, these first few characters are the ones that are out of power at the start of the movie, but can be used or name dropped in different ways just to make the whole world seem that much more alive. William Sharp and Joseph Price. These two acted as a sort of twin head for the West Side Rollers, with William Sharp being the number one and his nephew Joseph being the one that got his hands dirty most of the time. The West Side Rollers were a small gang of street racers based in the burbs around Stillwater. They stole auto parts from time to time and were small potatoes compared to everything else the Saints got involved in. The gang also had access to the best mechanic in the city, Donnie, but that's about all they had going for them. Benjamin King. The former leader of the Vice Kings gang, after amassing great wealth since its start in the 70s, King was trying to go legit before being betrayed by his top lieutenants Warren Williams and Tanya Winters, leading to infighting amongst the remaining members of the Vice Kings gang until Benjamin King came back with the Saints to take out his former gang. Angelo Lopez, the final leader of the Los Canales gang, the OGs of Stillwater. The gang started by Angelo's father, Alejandro Lopez. They once had a stranglehold on both the drug and gun running trades within Stillwater and a stranglehold on the entire city. Angelo was the final leader of this once great organization that was killed on the runway trying to flee the city in hopes of one day avenging his brother Hector. These characters in the organizations could be used as shorthand to reference different times within the Saints' rise, while staying within the world, as these events would be known to the characters and fans. They would also be points of interest that could get lorehounds new to the franchise something to look into, possibly setting up other projects that explore the dismantling of those organizations, maybe some kind of TV show or something. Anyway, next up are the characters that do have a role to play for our film. Julius Little. This hockey fan is the founder and leader of the 3rd Street Saints. Johnny Gat. He initially joined the Saints after he notices how the gang wars are torn his local area apart. He is crucial to the takedown of the Vice King and Ronin gangs. Johnny will be integral to the plots of both films, and as such we'll really talk about him more so in the second video. Side note, Johnny Gat is my personal favorite character amongst the Saints because he's Johnny motherfucking Gat. Anyway, Dexter, Dex Jackson, and Troy Bradshaw. These are members of the 3rd Street Saints that will help along Johnny Gat for the schemes within this first film. The two of them have a greater role to play in the second film though, so just like Johnny Gat, I'll elaborate more on them in part 2. Richard Monroe, the police chief in Stillwater, and a dirty one at that. Alderman Richard Hughes, the secret villain of the movie that gets the party started from the shadows. Mayor Marshall Winslow, the mayor of Stillwater and the target of the film's main assassination plot. These are the main players in this film from the game, and most of these characters do return with a role to play in the second film, albeit different roles to fill in many cases. Okay, now that we've reached this section, I think it's finally appropriate to explain why I think it's only the epilogue of Saints Row 1 that's worth exploring. One reason being that Saints Row 2 has a superior story that made the franchise stand out as different from GTA. A lot of that though was due to the events that take place in the first game, mainly the epilogue. Secondly, if the plot was both games were played out in their entirety, the movies would more or less be the same, as in take down the other gangs and become the only game in town type stories. Focusing mainly on the epilogue of Saints Row 1 in the first movie will introduce us to the world and give us an exciting one-shot story that also sets up the status quo and legend of the 3rd Street Saints that will be referenced often in movie 2. I also mentioned that the movie could be made in the same style of satire as the film Black Dynamite. As that film was a satire of 1970s blaxploitation films, this would be a satire of the early 2000s crime dramas like Paid in Full, Trading Day, or Dirty. What all that means, well, I'll tell ya. Movie 1 will begin with the protagonist and Johnny Gat celebrating after the Saints have taken over the city. Driving around, drinking, cursing the name of the fallen foes, you know the vibes. The two are interrupted when the protagonist gets a phone call from Julius. He congratulates him for his good work and promotes him to his right-hand man. Player P and Johnny start celebrating again, but Jules tries to calm the pair down and talk business. He starts to talk about having a job from the mayor that needs doing when he's interrupted by the police. Jules tells the protagonist that he's getting pulled over and hangs up. Johnny says they're out of liquor and that they should stop on the way back to the old church their hideout is set up in. They do so, greeting some fellow Saints at the corner store, and while making their purchase, they see that Jules has been arrested on the local news. The Saints scramble and ask the protagonist, from whom Jessica became the person in charge from the time being, what they should do next. From there, we cut to the protagonist talking to Richard Hughes, attempting to negotiate the release of Jules. Richard says he will only release Jules if the Saints assassinate the mayor. Power Player will be skeptical, inquiring as to why the hell the police chief would want the mayor dead. Richard will tell him nothing, reminding him again the terms of the deal and that they could all still go down for the murders of the other gang leaders as well as many others before hanging up. We should then get a montage of the Saints working on a plan to assassinate the mayor and save Julius and by proxy themselves. Now, as always, this isn't the 100% definitive way. These are just ideas to get one thinking about the IP in a new way to begin with. So if you want to know exactly what my version of the movie would look like and all the details, use the thumbs up below and express yourself. Anyway, after the epic montage, we are then presented with the final setup of the plan the Saints spent all that time working on. Something properly spectacular, like the reveal of the true plan at the end of Ocean's 11. I don't know what that would look like, but the point is we should only get hints as to what they would do via the montage with all the pieces coming together during the job, and it should be a bit on the spectacular side and involve remote explosives. More on that at the conclusion of this sentence. That being done, the Saints back at their hideout to watch the results of their work. Bada bing, bada boom, the mayor is kaboom. And the authorities are none the wiser aside from the cops that sent you on the mission, of course. Calling the police chief, the Saints are told that they won't be releasing Jules, sending everyone into a bit of a rage, and Dex and Terry threatening to kill Richard before departing. Richard continues to talk, telling the remaining Saints that if they would let him finish, they would be aware that Jules won't be released until they meet with the Alderman in a few days before hanging up. We can then get a few shots of protagonist 1 and Johnny, with them sharing a few moments such as Johnny revealing he wants to get serious about repairing his relationship with Aisha. Johnny will also express in this moment that he has a strange feeling about this whole thing and maybe the protagonist shouldn't go or send someone else. Our pimpin' protag turning down those options will remind Johnny that he can't just leave Jules there and that it wouldn't be right to do this kind of business through any other way but face to face. Besides, I'm ready, revealing that they're armed and plan to wear body armor. The two part ways with Johnny preparing to reconcile with Aisha and your favorite actor here preparing for the meeting with the Alderman, calling Dex one last time trying to get him to hold off with no result. So the meeting with the alderman goes down, and the protagonist is on the alderman's private yacht overlooking the mayor's funeral in the distance, asking about when Jules will be released. The alderman says that Mr. Little's release has already been arranged and that he simply wanted to meet the person who made him mayor face to face to thank them, of course. Befuddled, there will be no response. Continuing on, the alderman will spill the beans, explaining that he was behind the whole thing before revealing his plans for Stillwater once he becomes mayor, starting with ridding the city of the 3rd Street Saints. The protagonists would then reach for their weapon as the armed guards reach for theirs, but before anyone gets to fire, the yacht will explode with a sniper shot being heard in the distance. The final shot will be of Jules watching the whole thing on the shore, dropping a solo thug tear, sirens blaring in the distance. Alright, so that's the first movie, and as such, there are still questions to be answered, and that's exactly what you want heading into a sequel. With the future of both the Saints as well as the protagonist unknown for anyone that is unfamiliar with the series, but an indication that a wild ride is about to commence for those who are. A wild ride that we will explore next time here in the 3-Star Lounge. In the meantime, if you want to keep up with anything else I am doing, you can check out the 3-Star Lounge podcast. Over there, we have podcast versions of video game stories. Right now, we are doing Greedfall as well as Control, so you can check that out over there. If you want a little taste, there is a link to the preview video that I have here on the 3-Star Lounge channel. And every Wednesday, you can also check out the Potluck, where you get what you get. With me and my friends, we talk about the most random things in media, from movies to video games to music. We had a psychic battle royale. We do it all over there. It's a good time, lots of fun. You can check that out. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Would you watch it? And I hope you come back for more here in the 3-Star Lounge. Have a good day.